Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating, highly provocative 2007 text by an author named Se Feng, and the title alone really sets the stage. If you don't want to get married, come to Lifechanyuan. Now, we aren't here to endorse this, but rather to impartially look at how this author radically deconstructs the very foundation of human marriage, and, well, what kind of massive alternative he proposes. It's a wild ride, so let's get into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, the marriage trap. Second, deconstructing societal norms. Third, the harsh daily realities. And finally, number 4, the life-changing alternative.
Section 1. The marriage trap. To kick things off, we really need to understand the core problem here. The text uses this absolutely striking metaphor right out of the gate, comparing marriage to a baited fishing hook. The fragrance represents the societal allure, right? The romance, the promises of happiness, that's what draws people in. But the author argues that once you take that bait, you're forcibly dragged out of the open water and into captivity. It's an irreversible transition from boundless potential to strict, unyielding confinement.
And this brilliantly illustrates the author's main thesis. You've got this stark contrast between the national freedom of single life and what he calls the programmatic slavery of the family structure. The vast ocean represents true independence in heaven on earth. The small pond, on the other hand, is the family unit. The author literally calls family a program, a rigid system where you lose all control and just become a slave to its endless demands.
So, here is the kicker. The author views the very origin of marriage as inherently selfish. He completely strips away any concept of romance, redefining it as a drive to eternally possess another human being. It asks a pretty profound question. Why would a free fish ever choose to suffer in a small pond? His conclusion? Only the selfish, the incompetent, or the sick actively seek out this kind of confinement.
Section 2. Deconstructing societal norms.
The text anticipates the immediate arguments society throws at us for getting married. The first one it tackles is intimacy. It directly asks, do we really need a rigid family structure just to enjoy a sexual relationship?
The author argues that as long as there's mutual consent, intimacy is a sacred right. He posits that society and external observers have absolutely no moral grounds to restrict intimacy to the confines of a marriage contract. In this view, if the activity brings happiness and satisfaction to consenting adults, that in itself is the only moral standard required. No marriage certificate needed.
Okay, next up, it questions the desire for a stable, predictable life, which is, often cited as a primary benefit of settling down and starting a family.
Well, the text bluntly counters that sacrificing your freedom and happiness simply to achieve stability is a terrible trade. The author uses a darkly humorous analogy here. If ultimate stability is your only goal, lying buried in a coffin achieves that perfectly. The implication is that a hyper-stable, predictable family life is basically akin to a living death, completely devoid of the vitality of true freedom.
Right, and what about the ancient biological drive to have children, to continue the family line? This is perhaps the most deeply ingrained societal justification for marriage we have.
The argument presented here is a radical shift in perspective. It suggests humanity's lineage will continue regardless of individual marriage contracts. We can continue humanity simply by viewing all children as our own. It frames the insistence on having your own biological offspring not as some beautiful necessity, but as an arrogant, selfish desire to leave your specific mark and essentially monopolize the earth.
Now, this part is fascinating. The text actually gives some slightly absurd yet highly pragmatic advice for dealing with parents who try to force you into marriage. First, it suggests throwing them off balance with deep philosophical questions like, what comes after death? But if they still insist, the text says you should make them foot the bill. It's like, okay, if you demand a grandchild, then you buy the house, you pay for the wedding, and you fund the child's life. It's a pretty brilliant way to turn societal pressure right back on itself.
Section 3. The harsh daily realities. So what happens if you actually enter into this arrangement? The author paints a very vivid and honestly exhausting picture. From constantly multiplying in-laws to strict financial surveillance, the text lists family life as a series of complicated, miserable details. You don't just get a spouse, you get 2 sets of parents and endless social obligations. Your spare time, hijacked by distant cousins' weddings and uncles' funerals. Furthermore, the author highlights a total loss of privacy, describing how you have to act like a thief just to give money to your own parents, and how a simple phone call from an old friend becomes a tense, monitored situation. And if your partner develops a chronic illness, the text bluntly states your leisure time is gone forever. The author completely strips away all the romanticized notions of family. He wants the reader to understand that movies and novels are basically lying to you. The reality, according to the source material, is that conflict, drama, and endless, messy obligations are inevitable. It describes screaming matches and threats as routine, unavoidable features of the family program.
Section 4. The Lifechanyuan Alternative.
If traditional family life is the problem, what exactly is the answer? The author contrasts what he calls the hell of traditional earthly marriage with the absolute freedom of the 1,000-year world model, a state of being he claims to have experienced. In this alternative world, there are absolutely no marriages and no family units. Because those structures of possession are completely removed, he argues that the people there enjoy a level of happiness and true human freedom that people on Earth cannot even comprehend.
Of course, a highly practical, totally natural question arises. Without a traditional family structure, a spouse, or biological children, who takes care of you when you are sick or when you reach old age? Well, the solution presented is Lifechanyuan itself. The author proposes forming a massive communal society of 1 million unmarried individuals. Instead of fractured, isolated nuclear families, these unmarried people act as one giant collective family. The idea is that in this massive community, there will always be someone to care for you when you're unwell, and there will be a huge support system to provide for you in your old age and eventually see you off.
The text concludes with a direct, super-energetic invitation to abandon societal norms entirely and join this alternative lifestyle. The author confidently claims that if everyone simply lives according to these communal values, all the potential issues of life have already been thought through and resolved. It's a bold call to journey through life together, but entirely outside the confines of the traditional small pond.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought based on our analysis today. When we look at this radical deconstruction of society's oldest institution, it forces us to ask, are our traditional family structures genuinely serving our best interests and happiness? Or are they just the only pond we've ever known, and we're simply too afraid to swim out into the vast ocean? It's certainly a perspective that makes you look at the world a little differently. Thanks for exploring this with me today.